Hi everyone, Imortilize here, and today I want to talk about the White Walker Cryosplosion Frostbite Shaman. Want to perma-freeze enemies as a White Walker? Never want to worry about mana again? This is the build for you. Before we dive into details, let me show you some footage of how the build plays. Okay, let's dig into it and start with the skills first. So the most important skill for this build is Summon Thorn Totem, and that synergizes really well with Spriggan Form, as you'll see. So if we come in Summon Thorn Totem, the most important node we're taking here is Rotten Core. When we summon up a totem and desummon it, or if it dies, it blows up and causes a burst of physical damage and applies poison. But as you can see in the notes, if we also take the Pillars of Herot node, which is down here, it changes it into cold damage and changes the poison into frostbite, giving it a freeze rate and a bit of bonus cold resistance for good measure. And then we take this node over here, which gives it a bit more freeze rate multiplier, and for every point of attunement you get, it also gives you even further freeze rate as a base. This is important later on, as you'll see. We'll be trying to stack attunement. Beyond that, we take 4 nodes here because we just want frostbite to last as long as possible. The longer it lasts, the more we can stack it. 60% poison chance here will be enough, as you'll see later. We take 2 points over here on Memories of Etra. This means we can have infinite rage. These 2 nodes here, Ancient Power and Lethal Thickets, are the only 2 nodes in the skill tree that do work with the dot damage and scale it as multiplicative damage buckets, and there are not many multiplicative damage buckets going on, so we want to max these. And then if you can get your maximum of 26 points through really good gear and getting the +4 on the affixes, you could come over here to get more points in Frenetic Attunement, which gives you more summoning speed, which means you can cast the totems, desummon them and blow them up faster. As you'll see later on, cast speed is king in this build. These points here are optional. They could be applied elsewhere. You could even potentially try and take a point out of here if you felt rage management wasn't an issue at all and put a further one here, but I feel like this will make the build way nicer to play. Next we come over to Spriggan Form. The most important nodes here of note, we need to come down here. You need to take 4 points in Totem Warden. This is just mainly for the summoning speed, means you can cast your totems faster. And then you need to take 1 point here to be able to come over to Unbound Garden. This allows you to summon all 3 of your totems at a time, which means every time you cast, you're going to be summoning 3 and then desummoning the 3 before and blowing them up constantly in a triangle, giving you a huge AoE target area. And making it just super easy to use. And this also is point and click. You can summon and destroy them anywhere on the screen that you can see. Next most important is coming up here to the Ice Branch, because this converts you into cold damage, converts your poison chance into frostbite, and gives you a base freeze rate. This affects you, your Spirit Thorns, and your Summon Vines, and your Thorn Shield. Everything within the skill tree turns to cold, which is super handy because it means it all applies frostbite. I came over here and took this node here for Hunter's Bane because it means your vines, which you can summon up with all the cast speed super fast, these will then attack at range. This will allow them all to apply more frostbite at a pretty insane rates. You can get 400 or 500 stacks of frostbite pretty easily on this build once you've got enough cast speed. It doesn't matter if they survive or not, you can just summon up more at lightning speed. And then we come down here, you only really need to take 1 point here, but I've taken 5. You could optionally take some points out of here and put them in duration for Thorn Shield or into the Eter's Bulwark if you feel like you can scale your armor more consistently here by applying Thorn Shield, but this does mean you've got to manage your Thorn Shield. This just gives you flat armor all the time, so it means regardless of Thorn Shields you're just tankier. And then importantly, you need to take Introspection. It means no matter where you cast Thorn Shield, it will always apply to you, which is super handy. And then optionally, I've taken these two because with the Artor's helmet you can have an extra companion, so you might as well make use of it. This allows you to have a second Spriggan at the same time, meaning you can keep the uptime of their bonus aura more likely up more of the time. And even if one dies, you've still got one alive. That's kind of the thinking there. But if nothing else, they attack pretty fast at range, so they can help apply Frostbite pretty quick. Next, we come over to Summon Spriggan. Most importantly here, ultimately you're going to want to come down to Branches of Winter. This again converts them into cold, frostbite chance, base freeze rate. This is entirely optional, but it does allow you to, it gives your aura freeze rate multiplier, so it means all of your minions, your vines, your scorpion later on, your totems, everything are all going to gain more freeze rate. It means you can apply frostbite faster. I would take at least 1 point here, but if you can max out your skill points and make it so you don't need crit avoidance anymore for your minions, you can max this out no problem. Then after that I would definitely take some points here, at least 2, maybe 3, and then a couple of points in here, or alternate them if you feel it's more powerful in Aura of Loyalty. This will just help keep your minions in general alive, which is a bit of a chore later on. This node down here is optional, but I took it because you're going to be stacking a fair amount of attunement, and the dodge rating is double for minions, so it just gives them a bit more of a chance against physical enemies by dodging their attacks up front. And then you want to come up here, make sure you max out Warding Bark for the extra armor, physical res, and then take as many points as you can in health. You could optionally take a point out of here and put it in health, but survivability is pretty much impossible later on anyway for most minion builds, so reviving them is probably better than just trying to make them tankier, and making their utility is probably more useful in my opinion. Over here, this skill is entirely optional. You can try whatever you like. I took Summon Scorpion because he can be converted into cold, and the affix for plus Scorpions gives plus minion damage. Unfortunately, the affix for Spriggan form gives extra damage whilst transformed, and this isn't very useful to us because that doesn't scale minion dot damage. It only scales your damage, which is a bit unfortunate. So we've taken Summon Scorpion because he can become massive, he can become a bit more of a target to try and take off some of the aggro from Summon Spriggan. He's also quite tanky as well, and he applies pretty fast, attacks pretty fast, so he can apply Frostbite pretty consistently and pretty quickly himself. So we just take 5 points both of these for the resistances, so that's defense, bit of extra size over here for 3 for extra size. We take 5 points here for extra bleed chance, plus 50% extra damage over time, so it means he's going to do more damage with his dot damage. The extra 50% bleed chance is super handy because once in combination with this node down here, Winter Endures, it converts all your bleed chance into frostbite chance. So that 50% plus 35% base means he's almost always applying frostbite on every single hit. And then you take 1 point over here so he can just pull an enemy every 8 seconds, bit of crowd control. And then you only really need 1 point here. You could optionally put the other 4 points wherever you like. But the extra freeze rate multiplier just means he can stack frostbite quicker, and then it means he does a bit more damage with the cold damage, although it's fairly negligible. Unfortunately, the baby scorpions do not convert to cold. If they did, I would take points here because they would be better, but they don't. They just stay as poison scorpions. And then finally, Eter's Blessing. We absolutely need this to help with survivability. 5 points here to make it cost less. This point is a must-have. Means every time you cast Thorn Shield in Spriggan form, it will also cast Eter's Blessing. Does mean it's only castable on ourselves because we've made Thorn Shield only castable on ourselves, but it means that we gain the benefit from it really easily all the time. 3 points here for knockback to make sure the enemies around you just don't get too close to you. Just worth noting, this doesn't work on bosses or bigger enemies particularly at all, so don't rely on that around bigger enemies. It's just useful against small groups of big groups of small enemies. Come over here, increase the healing, great, keeps you alive more. This one here, yep, just means every time you cast it, you've got 100% chance to cast Healing Totem. Again, helps keep you alive, and that also benefits your minions. We absolutely need a point in Purge because this cleans us of all ailments, so dot damage on you can quickly get rid of by casting Thorn Shield. And then we just take 2 points over here in Efflorescence and Regrowth because this gives you essentially 50% more healing by doing 50% here, 50% over 4 seconds, and then this does another 50% when it ends. So you gain 3 healing. Again, it just helps keep you alive. Next, we're going to passives. Your standard, the actual passives are pretty thin in terms of how we can synergize for minion dot damage, and in particularly Shaman minion builds, I found. So what we focus here is all of the main defensive options, and then any flat additive damage I can get in combination with any penetration along with it, as you'll see. So Attunement is king in this build, second to cast speed, so we've taken this node here, maxed out. Attunement's great, extra freeze rate multiplier, extra damage, scales all of our minion skills, and we get free resistances. That's a must-have. We've taken 1 point here just to bump the points up. Gives you health, gives minion percentage health. That's pretty nice in the lower corruptions and running up to that point. I've taken 6 points here because it's flat additive minion damage, and it means when you use a potion it will heal your minions for a load. It can be useful for trying to keep your minions alive, plus the damage is always welcome. And then 5 points over here just for you and your companions to have pretty significant increased health, particularly for your companions, and more importantly the extra revival speed, so if your companions do go down you can just run over and revive them quicker. Next we're coming to Beastmaster. We've taken the typical defensive options. 8 points in Ursine Strength, gives you 32% extra armor on your strength. 16% damage taken reduction from nearby enemies. That's just incredible. It's a separate multiplicative damage reduction outside of armor and resistances and such, so that's just great for staying alive in close combat, which you will be doing probably quite often no matter how ranged your build is. Then we take 5 points here. Aspect of the Boar is insane. This will proc all the time because it lasts 5 seconds and can and it has a 2-second cooldown, and it gives you 15% damage reduction during that time. And then we take 5 points in Porcine Constitution to further that to 30% damage reduction and to give you bonus health regeneration as well. So it just makes you really tanky compared to what you would normally expect to be, because that's after all of your other damage reduction buckets. And then we take 2 points here for good measure, base health for you, but more importantly base health for companions, so that scales nice with their percentage increases. Then we come over to Druid. You could take 7 points here for the endurance and armor. Depends if you need it to cap your endurance, because you want to be capping at 60% endurance, but by the end you shouldn't need to put 7 here. You just take the 5 so you can get the 300 minion armor. And then we come over here and take 5 points here for the free extra armor and also the chance to cast Thorn Shield for free when being hit. That helps with management a little bit. And then we take 5 points here in Winds of Leaf because that just gives us 15% cast speed. Also makes our minions attack faster, which is nice for the vines and such to be able to apply Frostbite faster. And it also makes us in Spriggan form and our summon Spriggans move faster. Movement speed's always welcome. We take 5 points Druidic Prowess for the 5 Attunement and 5 Strength. Gives us more armor, more damage, more freeze rate multiplier, and then all attributes, so we get even further bonuses across the board there. We take 1 point in Blessed Springs just to give us access over here to River Spirits. This does give us a tiny bit of minion cold damage, but it's pretty negligible. But when we come over here, this will give us more minion cold damage, which affects all of our dot damage. A pretty decent amount of minion freeze rate multiplier as well as a base, and more importantly at 5 points gives us a 40% frostbite chance and 40% minion frostbite chance, meaning our totems will be at 100% and frostbiting on every single totem every single time, which is great for applying the frostbite. And then we come over to Shaman. We take 8 points here in Shamanic Fusion for the 8 Attunement. Again, more damage, more minion freeze rate multiplier, and more importantly, 80% penetration. This also applies to our minions, and that is a separate damage bucket, essentially. So this is one of the only nodes here that we got access to that really will benefit our minions and make us amplify our damage more than additive. Beyond that, we only take 1 point here because this is not really useful to us, but it allows us to get the extra cast speed here in Totemic Fury, which is great for casting totems faster. And then here we take 8 points in increased totem damage because this does affect all of our skills within the Spriggan Form tree and our Summon Thorn totems. I don't know why Spriggan Form is a totem skill, but it is, which means it applies to all of the dot damage within his tree. I tested, it does work. And then we've taken 10 points here because it's the one that gives us the most per point for increased additive minion cold damage. We've gone for 10 points here in Herot's Path because that just gives us 300% minion freeze rate multiplier again. It's quite large. And And then we come over here and we take as many points as we can in Sky's armor, because later on with the amulet we're using in our build, when there's stacks of chill on the enemies, each one of our minions will get a multiplier to their freeze rate multiplier, which means they'll be able to apply frostbite even quicker. You could optionally take some points out of this for less damage but more chance for chill. There's also some other skills you probably could toy around with if you really wanted to try and get this to 10. If you got this to 10 points, you would always chill an enemy on hit, and you can get 3 stacks on them, and that reduces their attack speed, cast speed, and movement speed, I believe. But yeah, more importantly, synergizes with the amulets. Beyond that, whilst you're leveling up, you could take Protective Circle for extra resistances per totem, but later on you should be able to solve all your resistances and well and beyond without any problems. And most of the rest of the nodes just do not affect minions. They're fairly weak here. You're going to get stun avoidance anyway. The attunement would be nice, but we don't need it. And the same over here. You only get 1 attunement for that, so it's not really worth it. Moving on to the gear. So we've got some interesting uniques here. The main ones of note, we've got the Artor's Legacy. I've chosen this because it gives you +2 to all minion skills, and then since we're using 4 of those, you're getting essentially 8 extra skill points, which is really nice. Increased chill duration means when you chill them, it will last for longer. That's useful. The final 2 affixes are useless to us. The extra companion is welcome but not necessary. Does give you base cold resistance, although that's not particularly difficult to solve on this build. And then yeah, when you slam it and you want to get your stats in the legendary potential, you really want to be looking to get as many points in Summon Thorn Totem as possible, because it gives you the extra points to put in that tree, plus it increased damage to totems, and it gives you increased damage to totems as well on top of that if you get the double stats. So you can get, it's still additive, but that's quite large in the grand scheme of things. You could optionally change this for a base, such as the base down here, which gives endurance and maximum health gain as endurance. If you decided that the extra 2 minion skills were not for you, this would make you really, really tanky, and then you could put 4 stats on as you like, and 5 if you seal 1 away. So you could get extra attunement for a bit of extra damage, or you could put some endurance mods on there and stuff. This could allow you to get, it would allow you to solve your endurance quicker, and it could allow you to get your endurance threshold up to near 2,000 if you get your HP pool up to this sort of level, nearly 4,500 to 5,000, which is easy to do on this build. But I personally think the extra 2 minion skills is more useful here, especially since it will allow you to get to the extra cast speed in Summon Thorn Totems, and defense is not the big issue on this build. It's more how do you gain more damage. If you had more multiplying damage buckets, this build would easily go into the higher corruptions. Secondly, the most important next unique is the Frozen Eyes of Formosus. This is actually really good for this build. It gives you increased cast speed. That's absolutely king in this build. And it gives you minion freeze rate per stack of chill up to 300%, which is insane. If you get 3 stacks of chill and you apply all your minions, and you get 3 of those applied, all your minions are going to get 900% extra freeze rates on them, which just, it's insane. The amount of frostbite they'd be able to apply would be mental. It gives you a chance to apply chill and hit, which is a bit annoying. It's a bit frenetic in this build, because the only way to really apply that when you're in Spriggan form is to use your Spirit Thorns, and when you use your Spirit Thorns, it means you're not casting your totems for damage. But with the increased chill duration from the Artors, and with enough cast speed, you can proc chill pretty quickly, and it lasts long enough that you don't really need to be casting Spirit Thorns for too long for it to cast, especially on top of the on-hit effects that you gain when they hit you, chilling them. So you should be able to keep chill up without having to use Spirit Thorns too much. And then increased minion cold damage, obviously good. It's going to affect all of our minions because they're all cold damage based. So this is great for the build. And then if you're lucky enough to get a 2 LP version of this, the best 2 slams here are probably minion damage and health and stun avoidance. Flat damage is a bit higher, but it's not enough to outweigh really the amount of stun avoidance you can get here on a tier 7. Stun avoidance is actually quite underrated in endgame builds, especially when you've got a build like this that uses a shield. And then yeah, the health is always nice and more additive damage. Next we come down, we're using the Cradle with Raised, and this is actually quite incredible for this build. This allows us to get to 100% block chance when we've got 4 stacks of Golden Aegis. It makes you insanely tanky. It's one of the only ways you can gain ward on this build consistently because of no on-hit and kill effects for you. And if you get the right rolls, you can get max block chance, max reduced damage taken on blocks. You're taking loads less damage, a bit of extra block effectiveness for a bit of bonus damage reduction on block, and either increased armor or resistance both be welcome. I think increased armor would be better because that will just give you more percentage of armor mitigation than the extra block effectiveness you would gain from your resistances. But if you got your resistances, you could then go and try and solve. You could take one of your resistances off elsewhere and make up for it with extra HP or such. So both would be absolutely great. The other unique we use is the Ribbons of Blood, and the reason we're using this most importantly is to make it so your minions cannot be crit, which means we do not need crit avoidance them anymore. Also gives you a bit of increased health. That's exceptionally nice. Health is really good in this build. It's the only way we can really build any significant damage reduction, especially with the maxed out endurance and other damage reduction buckets based on health. And it gives your melee minions a little bit of leech, although really in the grand scheme of things that's not going to keep them alive much in the end game, so I wouldn't rely on that. And the fire resistance is welcome here as well. It helps us get that to 75% plus without the need of the Shaman passive, meaning the Shaman passive will further scale the extra block effectiveness you gain from total uncapped resistance here on the Cradle of the Erased. And then if we're slamming that, we'll just want to put more additive minion damage, and then probably endurance here, just so you can cap out without having to use it elsewhere. But you could put health in here, or any other useful endurance threshold, or any other useful stats if you've got endurance elsewhere and you don't need endurance. The next most important stat I would say would be the wand. I tried all various different weapons, but this is probably the best setup. You could get more cast speed with a staff, but the problem with staff is it takes up both slots, so you wouldn't be able to have an offhand or a shield. And this can give you up to 52% increased cast speed, plus you get 12% on the weapon, so that's 64, and the staffs only go up to 92. So for the loss of one slot, you don't gain enough cast speed to make it worthwhile. You would gain up to an extra 18% cold penetration as well. That's quite a big damage multiplier, but again, it doesn't outweigh the fact of having a second, either an offhand or a shield, in my opinion. So yeah, your two king stats here, cast speed and cold penetration for damage multiplier and increased cast speed. The other two stats, unfortunately, there isn't really anything that really benefits this build, so that's a pain, but the cast speed here is really what you're interested in, and the cold penetration anyway. Then we come over to the chest piece. Yeah, this chest piece here, there's many bases here that could work. The increased health, the cooldown recovery isn't that useful. The increased health is though. You could also take movement speed and health regen. If you've already got loads of health, this will give you more movement speed, and health regen is really good on this build. You could also take the heavy armor if you want more armor with stun avoidance. You could even take the physical resistance one here if you wanted to solve physical resistance more here, or you could take the attunement minion damage one as well if you wanted more damage focus, or even the endurance one, although that's a bit low, so I'd probably stick to these and above. I chose this because the health scales your endurance threshold and such. Yeah, you just want to max your vitality here. This will give you more necrotic and poison resistance, more importantly necrotic, which is one of the harder resistances to solve on this build. And it gives you just more HP, and then you just want max increased damage to totems because that scales your main damage. Health, increased health, just more HP, and armor if you can get that in a sealed, because that just makes you even tankier. There are other stats in here you could take. You could take resistances, you could take endurance, you could take endurance thresholds and such, but I feel just here you just want to stack HP and armor and get that damage. Coming down to the belt, I've taken poison and cold here. There are other options. You could take flat armor if you can solve poison and cold elsewhere. You could take increased movement speed, although that's probably unnecessary. Yeah, those are probably your main ones here. I would take the poison and cold one. Again, take flat minion damage, although for some reason I've set that to T1, so we'll change that to, I think, probably T5. I think I set this to T5 because the other two we're going to use are better in the grand scheme of things. Additive damage becomes a little bit less beneficial the later on you go. So we've taken additive minion damage, minion health regen to help keep him alive. The armor and reduced bonus damage taken from critical strikes is important here. This is absolutely critical. You get a good roll of this, preferably T7, because that's going to help you solve your crit damage and just remove crit damage from the equation. And then the highest health you can get an insane amount of health there. That scales your HP hugely. And then if you're lucky to get the cleanse all ailments and potion use, that's useful as well. Just gives you another way of cleaning your ailments. Your other ring, I've taken Vitality Health Regen here, Attunement for damage, minion damage for extra more damage, health, endurance threshold, your standard stats for rings, and I've put lightning resistance here, but you can toy around that just to help you solve your resistances, or if you don't need to, you can put in any other useful stat alongside it, like endurance or whatever you need. You could also use the necrotic resistance ring if you need to solve necrotic, and if you did, or you could use the minion damage, minion health ring as well, but this becomes fairly small amount gains, and the health really won't help you much in the higher corruptions. Necrotic resistance would be more useful because then you'd be able to swap out your relic for something else, as I'll go into in a moment. Boots, I have taken a reduced bonus damage taken from critical strikes because this allows you to solve your critical damage and it gives you the most armor. Movement speed, you could go for T7 movement speed here. Maybe that would be better than going for the extra health or extra vitality. I've taken the vitality to help solve necrotic, but you could, and poison, but you could take a T5 vitality and take movement speed instead. Health regen, because that helps keep you alive against dots, and just massive amounts of HP from the hybrid health. And again, I've taken armor here, but you could take endurance threshold, any of those other defensive mechanics, whatever you can get and whatever you need. Your gloves, I've taken the armor mitigation, applying to damage over time. Most other builds take the Joral's obsession gloves because that applies minion stats to the minions, but unfortunately there's not many stats you can put on them on this build that apply to your minions that really matter that much. So I feel like this is better because this helps you against dot damage, and you can stack the stats you want. If you can get this with a really good experimental armor mitigation on dot damage as well, you can end up getting a pretty significant, even up to about 50% armor mitigation, counting towards damage over time, which is really handy. And then, you just want to max cast speed, max minion damage, although you could change that for max hybrid health again if you need to, and then just double health for more defense. And then coming over to the relic, I've taken the cold and necrotic relic. You could come over. You could take the increased minion damage, companion revive, and companion revive speed 1, which is great for keeping your companions alive and being able to get to them a bit easier. If you can solve your necrotic resistance elsewhere, you could also take the endurance relic if you need to increase your endurance as well. HP regen is an option, but it's pretty low, so I'd say those three are probably your best options here. Stats. You absolutely want +4 to your Summon Scorpion. That gives you 4 points to put in your Summon Scorpion, plus it's only just less than the standard increased minion damage as well, if you can get a T7 roll. Again, cast speed, so you can stack up huge amounts of cast speed, and health and endurance here to be able to max out your endurance. You can chop and change those as you need. The endurance you might already have capped, so you could change that out for endurance threshold or minion health by default, or resistances, or whatever you need. And I've shoved increased minion health here just to give them a little bit of survivability, but that isn't a must-have. That can be whatever other useful stat you find. So that's your gear. One other note, I will say, you don't have to use this shield. The other option you've got is an offhand catalyst. You can come down here and use a Fleshbound Tome. The intelligence isn't overly useful, but it does give you free minion damage and health, and on that you can put cast speed, and you can put other various stats on there, such as chance to chill attackers, which will mean it's easier for you to chill them, or resistances. War per second is pretty useless to us, and a minion health you can put on here as well, and I think just flat minion damage. So if you want to just go more damage and less defense, you can put an offhand catalyst in here and get a bit more additive damage and more cast speed. So that's an option. Moving on to the idols, these are quite straightforward really. These are just best in slot. You take 2 here, Grand Herots, for the extra haste, so every time you cast your totems you've just got a really good chance of having haste every time, and that just makes you get free movement speed, loads of it. I've put physical resistance here because it was actually easier to solve physical resistance through these than it was to in your gear. You could optionally take these out and put the health regeneration whilst transformed in here, which gives you really good health regen. You would just need to solve your physical resistance in your gear or through blessings otherwise. Beyond that, you just want 4 totems with max health, max increased damage totems. This scales your damage, gives you loads of health. But yeah, just whatever you find. I would prioritize the damage over health, but the chances are you're going to find each and odd before you can find the doubles. They're pretty rare to get the doubles, especially good ones. And then your final node, increased health, and then I've taken lightning res here to cap it out, but if you don't need lightning res, you can change that to anything you need. If you don't need resistances, you can put 30 flat health in there as well. Or if you need specific separate resistances, you can put 2 singles in there. This is just whatever you need, but yeah, increased health is always good. Going on to blessings. So your outcasts, yeah, increased large idol drop rate. Here can just be whatever you need. I've currently shoved helmet because that helps you find more Artors, but you can change that to whatever type of item you're looking for at the time. Then yeah, this is how we solve void resistance on this build. It's one of the hardest resistances to solve on this build. There's not many options for it unless you're using the belt that's designed to give poison and void resistance for primalists, which I wanted to avoid on this build. So by taking this, we just solve void resistance, and that takes that out of the equation. And the only other node in here that would be useful to us would be the flat HP increase, and as you've seen, we've got quite a good HP pool anyway. Every other node in here is pretty useless to us, so it made sense just to use this one. Here again, just take whatever type of weapon you want. So you probably want to be taking wands, because that's what you're going to be looking for, but if you decide you want to look for a different one, then by all means. Over here, for Lagon's Blessing, you want to take health regen. It's really good for keeping us alive in dot damage. So yeah, max one of these can get you well into the 200 plus health regen state without really needing much elsewhere. That's really good. So you can probably get up to 300 health regen on this build if you really wanted to without too much effort. Here again, we want to take wands. 1 shard drop rate. That just helps you get the cast speed and the cold penetration shards that you would like. You could optionally take prefix shard drop rate. Maybe that's better if you're looking for your class specific shards. Then we go over to the Reign of Dragons. All resistance is pretty king in most builds, but it's particularly useful here because it helps us solve resistances in the areas where are more difficult to solve. It means we can use our affixes elsewhere. Down here, class specific shards, we need those because we need to be able to try and get our summon scorpions, summon thorn totems and such a bit easier. This one's up for grabs. I've taken block chance because it helps you, that can get you to 100% block chance, but you could take increased armor for extra just flat defense if you need it. You could take, you won't need cold resistance. You could also take endurance threshold for a bit of extra bonus there, or physical resistance if you want to solve this. The other option is you could take chance to apply shred cold resistance, but you need to have a pretty much max roll of this to even be remotely useful, because the only way to apply it is through your spirit thorns, so you're going to have to stop using your main damage deal to apply it. And annoyingly, cold resistance stacks only last 4 seconds, so they don't last very long. And you also need to be really high on cast speed for this to work. You need to be at 130 plus % cast speed before this is really even remotely useful, and you pretty much only use it on single target. So it's all dependent on how you want to play. If you feel you've got enough damage, you're probably better off taking one of the defensive options. And finally, extra armor, because that's just always useful. So that's the overhaul of the build. Pros and cons of the build. Pros, it's super casual build to play. There's no mana management, and it's not too expensive to gear compared to other end game builds. Cons, the damage options are limited, especially in a multiplicative space. The movement is limited to run speed. You don't have much options in terms of dodge, rolls, or teleports with this current item setup. And your minions will die a lot at high corruption, so you will be relying on reviving them to keep them alive. So that's not ideal, but you should easily be able to get up to the 500 to 700 corruption sort of level if you've got all the gear and you've min-maxed quite a bit of your defensive options and you're at level 100. So that's the overview of the build, guys. Hope you enjoy the build and feel free to let me know your views in the comments below. If you like the content of this video and would like to see more, then hit the subscribe button below and check me out on my live stream in links in the video description. See you on the next video.